At 45, I had no reason to believe my life would ever change. Everything was carefully structured, my days predictable, my future secure. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't truly living either. Then, in one brutal moment, everything shattered. The accident stole more than just my ability to walk, it erased the life I had spent years building. 1 minute, I was full of plans, routines, and certainty. The next, I was sitting in a sterile hospital room, my fingers gripping the stiff fabric of my gown while a doctor solemnly delivered the words that would define the rest of my existence. "You'll never walk again." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just nodded, numb, as if my body had already accepted what my mind refused to process. Nurses murmured words of sympathy, their voices blending into the constant beeping of machines. Family and friends visited with careful smiles, their pity suffocating. No one knew what to say, and honestly, neither did I. At first, David was my anchor. He held my hand through therapy sessions, filled out mountains of insurance paperwork, and whispered reassurances late at night when I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He told me we would get through this together. He told me he wasn't going anywhere. But I saw it. The exhaustion, the quiet resentment creeping in like shadows under his eyes. He loved me, but love had its limits. The first time I saw him hesitate before helping me into my chair, I felt something inside me crack. It was small at first, just a splinter of doubt, but it spread quickly, splintering through my heart. I pretended not to notice when he stopped holding my hand as often, when he sighed too often, when he started staying late at work even when there was no reason to. Then, on a quiet, rainy evening, he finally admitted the truth I had been dreading. "I can't do this anymore." He didn't look at me when he said it, his voice was almost too soft, but I heard every syllable like a hammer against glass. I stared at him, waiting for a punchline that never came. His eyes were filled with sorrow, real, genuine sorrow. But no hesitation, he had already made his decision. I wanted to scream, to beg him to reconsider, but deep down, I knew. I knew this was inevitable. David had signed up for a marriage, not a lifetime of caregiving, and who was I to blame him for that? So, I did what I had always done. I let him go with dignity. When the door closed behind him, it was as if the last light in my life had flickered out. I sat in silence, staring at the empty space where he had been. Everything felt distant, unreal, like I had become a background character in someone else's life. Days turned into weeks, friends faded, their concern turning into awkward distance. My world shrank into the walls of my apartment, the silence pressing down on me like a living thing. My only visitors were nurses who rotated shifts, their voices polite but detached. They were there to complete a task, not to see me. The loneliness became unbearable, a constant ache gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I stopped counting days. I stopped hoping for anything to change. Then, on a cold Monday morning, change knocked on my door. A soft rap against the wood startled me from my haze. "Come in," I called out, my voice hoarse from disuse. The door opened slowly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a new face. He was tall, with kind eyes, and a presence that felt different, not intrusive, not clinical, just steady. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice warm but professional. "I'm Liam, your new caregiver." I studied him warily. I had seen many come and go, all carrying the same rehearsed sympathy, the same hollow assurances. I was just another assignment to them. But Liam didn't look at me with pity, he didn't fidget or force an empty smile, he just stood there, waiting, as if giving me space to decide how this would go. I wanted to dismiss him immediately. What was the point? He would leave eventually, everyone did. But then he stepped forward, pulling a chair beside mine, settling into it like he wasn't in a rush to escape. "I know you've been through a lot," he said, his tone careful, as if he knew I was seconds from shutting down. "I won't pretend to understand it, but if you let me, I'd like to help." I scoffed, shaking my head. "That's what they all say." Liam didn't flinch. "Maybe, but I'm not them." Something in his voice made me pause. He wasn't defensive, he wasn't trying to convince me, he just stated it as fact. For the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. It was faint, almost unrecognizable, but it was there. Curiosity. Liam's presence unsettled me, though not in the way I expected. Most caregivers walked in with rehearsed warmth, polite but distant, their smiles masking indifference. Liam was different. He wasn't trying to comfort me with empty words or false reassurances. He simply sat there, waiting, as if he understood that trust wasn't something he could demand, it had to be earned. For a while, I didn't speak, I just studied him, searching for cracks in his sincerity, waiting for the telltale signs of pity or obligation. When none came, I felt a strange flicker of something I hadn't felt in months: intrigue. Liam didn't push me to talk. Instead, he went about his tasks with quiet efficiency, adjusting the pillows on my chair, setting down a neatly folded blanket, and checking my medications. When he spoke, his voice was calm, unhurried. "I won't get in your way," he said after a few minutes. "I'm just here to help, however you need." I crossed my arms. "And what if I don't need help?" He met my gaze without hesitation. "Then I'll just keep you company." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Most people in my life, before and after the accident, had needed a reason to be around me. But Liam wasn't waiting for one, he just was. That first day passed in cautious silence. Liam didn't try to fill it with meaningless chatter, he didn't fidget when I ignored him, he simply existed in my space, unbothered by my walls, my bitterness, my unwillingness to accept help, and somehow, that made it harder to dismiss him. The next morning, he returned with a cup of coffee, setting it down beside me without a word. I glanced at it, then at him. "I didn't ask for this." He shrugged. "I know, but I figured you might want it anyway." I stared at the steaming cup, the rich scent curling into the air between us. It was exactly how I used to drink it, black, one sugar. I hadn't had a decent cup of coffee since before the accident. The realization sent a surprising lump to my throat. I didn't thank him, but I did take a sip. Days passed, and our strange routine continued. Liam never forced conversation, but he didn't avoid it either. He asked simple questions, not about the accident, not about my pain, but about me, my favorite books, the music I used to listen to, the places I wanted to visit before life caged me inside this chair. At first, I gave clipped, indifferent answers, but Liam had a way of listening that made me feel like my words mattered, and slowly, cautiously, I found myself talking more. One afternoon, Liam noticed the framed photo on my bookshelf. It was an old picture, slightly faded at the edges, a moment frozen in time, when I was standing on a sunlit street in Italy, laughing at something just out of frame. It felt like a different lifetime. "This looks like a good memory," he remarked, picking it up carefully. I swallowed. It was. He glanced at me, waiting, giving me the space to say more. I surprised myself by continuing. "I took that trip years ago. It was supposed to be the first of many." A bitter smile tugged at my lips, but life had other plans. Liam placed the photo back on the shelf, his expression unreadable. "Maybe one day, you'll make new memories just as good." I scoffed, doubtful. He didn't argue, he didn't tell me to be optimistic, he simply said, "Maybe," and left it at that. It was the first time in a long while that someone hadn't tried to force hope on me, and somehow, that made me feel it just a little more. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something unsettling. Liam was getting under my skin, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Liam's presence had become an unspoken comfort in my life, but I refused to acknowledge it. Admitting it would mean accepting that I needed someone, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Yet, each morning, when the sound of his knock echoed through my apartment, I found myself anticipating his arrival. I'd glance at the clock, pretending I wasn't waiting, and when he walked in with his quiet confidence, I felt a strange sense of ease settle over me. One afternoon, he arrived earlier than usual, carrying a small bag. I thought we could try something different today. I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" He set the bag down and pulled out a set of resistance bands, physical therapy. A sharp laugh escaped me. "That's cute, but in case you missed the memo, my legs don't work." Liam didn't react to the bitterness in my voice, he just sat on the couch across from me, calm as ever, that doesn't mean the rest of you doesn't. I looked away, my fingers tightening around the armrest of my chair. What's the point? The point, he said gently, is that your body hasn't given up on you, so maybe you shouldn't either. I hated how much his words hit me, how much I wanted to believe them. But hope was dangerous, it set you up for disappointment. Still, something in Liam's gaze held me there, waiting. Fine, I muttered, but don't expect miracles. He grinned, wouldn't dream of it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding as Liam adjusted the bands around my wrists. We'll start small, he said, guiding my arms through slow, measured movements. Just focus on what you can do. I followed his instructions, the movements simple but surprisingly exhausting. Every motion felt like a battle, not just against my body, but against the voice in my head telling me it was pointless. But Liam never rushed me, never let frustration seep into his voice. Each time I faltered, he met me with quiet patience, and when I finished, panting from exertion, he smiled as if I'd just run a marathon. You did great, he said, handing me a water bottle. I scoffed, rolling my eyes. I barely did anything. He shook his head. You tried, that's not nothing. I wanted to argue, to brush it off, but his sincerity left no room for my usual cynicism. So instead, I sipped my water and said, thanks. His lips quirked upward, but he didn't say anything, he didn't need to. That night, I stared at the ceiling again, but this time, something was different. The usual weight of hopelessness wasn't as heavy, the thought of tomorrow didn't seem quite so daunting. And that terrified me more than anything. Days passed, and my resistance to Liam's presence weakened in ways I wasn't ready to admit. I still guarded my emotions, still reminded myself that people had a habit of leaving. But with Liam, it was different. He didn't force himself into my world, he simply existed in it, steady and unshaken. I told myself that our routine meant nothing, that his daily knock on my door was just another part of the schedule, no different than my medication or the monotonous therapy sessions I barely tolerated, but deep down, I knew better. One morning, I woke up before my alarm, a rare thing. I lay there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling, an odd sense of anticipation curling in my chest. I wouldn't name it, wouldn't acknowledge what it meant. But when Liam knocked at exactly 9 a.m., something in me exhaled, as if I had been holding my breath all night. That day, he had a different energy about him, brighter, almost excited. You ready for another round? He asked, setting his bag down. I rolled my eyes. Oh yes, because lifting weights while sitting down is just the highlight of my day. He smirked, unbothered as always. Actually, we're trying something new. I narrowed my eyes. I don't like surprises. You'll like this one. He pulled out a small, folded mat and laid it on the floor. Then, to my utter confusion, he lowered himself onto it, stretching his legs out comfortably. I blinked. Are you sitting on the floor? He grinned. Yep. Why? Because today, we're going to try something different. He patted the floor beside him. Come down here with me. I let out a bitter laugh. You realize I can't, right? His expression softened, but there was no pity in his gaze, just quiet determination. I'll help you. I tensed. The idea of needing help with something so basic, getting onto the floor, made my stomach twist. I hated it, hated feeling incapable, hated that something so simple had become impossible for me. Liam must have sensed my hesitation because he didn't push, he just sat there, waiting, completely at ease. It's okay if you're not ready. His patience should have made it easier to say no. But somehow, it did the opposite. I let out a slow breath. Fine, but if you drop me, I'm never speaking to you again. His lips twitched. Noted. With careful movements, Liam guided me down, his hands firm but gentle as he supported my weight. I hated how vulnerable it made me feel, how aware I was of his touch. But once I was settled, something unexpected happened. I felt different. Sitting on the floor wasn't revolutionary, it didn't change my condition or erase the limitations I lived with every day, but it was something new, something I hadn't done since before the accident. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped in my chair. I looked over at Liam, who was watching me carefully, as if waiting for my reaction. "Okay," I admitted, exhaling slowly, "maybe this wasn't the worst idea." His smile was small but warm. "Told you." We sat there for a while, the silence stretching between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, if anything, it was grounding. The world felt different from this angle, like I had been given a new perspective on something I had taken for granted before. Then, Liam did something I wasn't expecting. He reached out and took my hand. It was a small thing, barely more than a touch, but the second our skin met, a jolt of something sharp and electric ran through me. I stiffened, my breath catching in my throat. Liam must have felt it too because his grip hesitated, as if giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I let my fingers rest in his, unsure of what it meant, unsure of what to do with the warmth spreading through my chest. For the first time since the accident, I wasn't just surviving. I was feeling. And that scared me more than anything else ever had. The moment Liam took my hand, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the physical touch, it was the realization that I had let it happen, that for the first time in a long time, I hadn't pulled away. But as soon as I acknowledged that, panic started creeping in. I withdrew my hand, not abruptly, but enough to put space between us. "We should probably get back to therapy," I murmured, avoiding his gaze. Liam didn't push, he simply nodded and adjusted his position, letting the moment pass without comment. And yet, the air between us felt charged, as if something unspoken had been exchanged. The session continued, but my thoughts were elsewhere, my movements were mechanical, following his instructions without truly focusing. My heartbeat, however, was another story. It thumped erratically, a reminder of emotions I wasn't ready to confront. Later that evening, long after Liam had left, I found myself staring at my reflection in the dim light of my bedroom. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. The lines on my face weren't just from age or stress, they were from the weight of time, of loss, of resigning myself to a life that felt smaller than it used to be. And yet, for the first time, there was something else in my eyes, something I couldn't quite name. Hope, longing, fear, maybe all three. The next morning, I braced myself for Liam's arrival, determined to act as if nothing had happened. When he walked in, his usual easy smile in place, I felt both relieved and frustrated. Relieved that he wasn't acting differently, frustrated that I had hoped for, what? A conversation about what had happened, an acknowledgement that my world felt slightly different now. I wasn't sure. "Ready for today's session?" he asked, setting his bag down. I nodded, pretending to adjust the blanket on my lap. "Yeah, what torture do you have planned for me now?" He chuckled. "You'll love this one." He pulled out something new this time. Parallel bars. My stomach twisted. "Liam," his expression turned serious. "Patient, I'm not asking you to walk, not yet, just to stand, even for a second." I stared at the bars, my heart pounding. The idea of standing again felt impossible, like asking the ocean to stop moving. But Liam didn't push, he simply waited. And somehow, that made me want to try. He positioned himself beside me, one hand lightly on my back, the other ready to assist, "On your own time." I exhaled sharply, steeling myself, my hands gripped the bars, my arms trembling as I shifted my weight forward. The familiar frustration surged, my body resisted, my legs unresponsive. But Liam's presence kept me grounded, his quiet encouragement like a steady rhythm against the storm of my thoughts. Then, it happened. A shift, the tiniest movement, a fraction of weight transferring from my chair to my legs. It wasn't standing, not really, but it was something. My breath caught, my pulse roaring in my ears. Liam's hand pressed gently against my back, steadying me. "That's it," he whispered, voice filled with something I couldn't place. Pride, excitement, hope. Tears burned behind my eyes. "You did it," he said softly, his hand still warm against me, even if it was just for a moment. I sank back into my chair, my heart hammering, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. It wasn't a miracle, it wasn't groundbreaking, but for the first time in a long time, I had proof that my body wasn't completely lost to me. And that changed everything. That evening, Liam stayed longer than usual. We talked, but not about therapy, not about progress. We talked about meaningless things, movies, books, places we wanted to visit, and yet, it didn't feel meaningless at all. As we sat in my living room, a quiet warmth between us, I realized that I didn't just look forward to therapy because of the progress. I looked forward to Liam. And that terrified me more than anything else ever had. The weight of my realization clung to me long after Liam left that night. It wasn't just about therapy anymore. It wasn't just about progress. Somewhere along the way, he had become something more than just my caregiver, more than just a presence in my daily routine. But the idea of acknowledging it, of naming it, terrified me. I spent years convincing myself that love, closeness, and connection weren't for me anymore, that my life was meant to be a quiet survival rather than something full. But Liam had come into my world and undone those beliefs one by one, not through grand gestures or empty words, but through small, consistent moments. And now, for the first time, I wanted more. The next session felt different. The tension between us was subtle, unspoken, but very much present. I noticed how Liam's hands lingered a fraction of a second longer when he adjusted my posture, how his eyes softened when he looked at me, how his voice, though steady, carried something deeper beneath it. And I noticed how I responded. How I found myself leaning into his presence more, craving the quiet comfort he brought. Today, Liam said, pulling out a set of support braces, I want to try something a little more challenging. I tensed immediately. Liam, he held up a hand. I know, I'm not pushing you, but I think you're ready to take the next step. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening on the armrests of my chair. And if I'm not? His expression softened. Then we wait. Something about that simple response settled the storm inside me. He wasn't making this a test. He wasn't measuring my worth in milestones. He was just here. For me. I exhaled slowly. Okay, let's try. Liam helped secure the braces, guiding me as I gripped the bars again. Unlike before, my body wasn't caught entirely off guard. I knew what to expect, the effort, the strain, the frustration. But what I didn't expect was the shift inside me. I wasn't doing this for Liam. I wasn't doing it because he believed in me. I was doing it because, for the first time, I believed in myself. With effort, I pushed down into my arms, feeling the strain shoot up my shoulders. My breath caught, my muscles screamed, but I pressed forward. Then, I felt it. A second, maybe two, but my legs held me. Liam's hands hovered near my waist, ready to catch me, but he didn't touch me, not yet. He was letting me have this moment, letting me feel it for myself. And when I finally sank back into my chair, breathless, heart pounding, I found him watching me with something so raw, so full, that my stomach flipped. That was incredible, he murmured, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. I let out a breathless laugh, half in shock, half in something that felt dangerously close to joy. I did it. You did. He crouched in front of me then, resting his hands lightly on my knees, not in a clinical way, not as a therapist, as something more. And for the first time, I didn't pull away. Later that evening, Liam stayed again, but this time, there was no therapy session, no exercises, just us. We sat in my living room, the silence between us filled with the weight of everything unsaid. He was close, closer than he'd ever been before. I could feel the warmth of him, the quiet steadiness that had kept me from drowning all these months. I don't know how to do this, I admitted quietly, my fingers twisting in my lap. It's been so long since I let myself want something. Liam turned slightly, his gaze steady. You don't have to know how, you just have to let yourself feel it. I swallowed. And what if it doesn't last? Then we take it one day at a time. He reached out then, not with urgency, not with expectation, just offering, a quiet invitation. And this time, when I took his hand, I didn't let go. I wasn't healed, I wasn't whole. But maybe, just maybe, I was ready to begin again. As Liam's fingers curled around mine, I let out a shaky breath and whispered, okay. And just like that, everything changed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next story.